folks. Very happy you could join us. My name is Mike Cassidy. I'm on the Faculty of Civil Engineering here at Berkeley. My colleague, Scott Moura, also professor of civil engineering. Maybe we could start by asking each of you to kind of introduce yourselves. For my specialty, my field of interest is transportation. Scott's also has an interest in transportation as well as in systems. The reason we're here is because in the Department of Civil Engineering, we have a general Master of Engineering program, but within that program, there are two emphases, two focuses, one being transportation, the other systems. And each of you has selected one of those two emphases for yourself. So maybe you could tell us, introduce yourself and tell us what that emphasis happens to be in your case. Oyo, would you be willing to start? Mr. Zhang, are you there? Transportation. Okay. All right. Marku, how about yourself? You can, okay. Marku, Mr. Castelli, can you hear me? What about you, Juliet? Can you hear me? Are you online?
Yeah, I'm a current student in the MEng program, Professor
Oh,
Cassidy
you kidding?
in the
Oh,
transportation
I
program.
thought,
I'm
yeah.
just here to
Oh,
answer questions for students if they have any.
yeah, of course.
I come to your office for
Yeah,
questions.
Juliet, I know who you are. I recognize the name, and then I saw a different picture and I got confused. Uh,
No problem.
so Juliet will serve a lot of, Juliet is an existing current eminence program. Her field is transportation. So when I tell you something that isn't true, Juliet can correct me.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Maritzi Perez, can you hear us?
Hi, yes. Hi, my name's Maritzi. I'm actually an advisor from the Fung Institute. I just wanted to stop by and join your session to learn more about the program since I'm fairly new.
Great, great.
Yeah. Thank you for
Cherry?
having me.
Oh, Cherry? Systems engineering. Okay, so we got a small mix of both. All right. So, Scott, you want to start telling the group a little bit about the university itself?
Yeah, sure. So, particularly for Bo Yao, Marco Andrea, and Wei Chi. Yeah, thank you for coming. Let me introduce you to, Berkeley Engineering and our department. So welcome, congratulations on being admitted. This is what it looks like here on the University of Berkeley campus. Actually, to be honest, this is not picking, one very special, good-looking day. I mean, it pretty much looks like this right now. So this is what you will enjoy. I also want to brag here for a moment. Actually, our department is number two ranked in civil, number one ranked in environmental. We've been number one, number two in civil, back and forth for the past years. It's essentially the only university in civil environmental engineering department that's been ranked number one or number two consistently for decades. So by being admitted to this program, you're essentially being admitted to the top department in civil environmental engineering. And we have world-renowned faculty. But what I actually want to emphasize is the bottom, guys. So Bo Yao, Wei Chi, and Marku. The biggest value you're going to get if you come to the University of California, Berkeley, is interacting with each other. That's really, I think, the core of Berkeley's excellence. Yes, we have great faculty, we have great staff, we have excellent programs, but it's really the talent, the creativity of the other students. So I'm actually going to push you. When you introduce yourself, you just typed in chat and no one opened their cameras. You come here to interact with each other. So I think it's very important, if you're comfortable, open your camera. Voice, let people hear your voice. Let them see your face, because you may form startups with your peers, right? You might go on to large tech companies having huge impact. You're here to really interact with one another. not sit behind a closed camera on Zoom. Okay. You know, something else I also want to tell you in Berkeley Engineering is you'll get access to a new building. It's actually the first time in a really, really, really long time that Berkeley Engineering has built a new student engineering center. There's also a building, you know, that's dedicated for the MEng program. Also, civil environmental engineering is housed in Davis Hall, which is sitting behind the lighted building that you see there. And also towards the left, you can barely see it as McLaughlin Hall. But actually, April 21st, we're having a grand opening ceremony for a new student engineering center. What does that mean to you? It's going to have a lot of open space where between classes you can kind of sit, meet with your friends, and work on, you know, problem sets or discuss projects with your peer students. It's going to be, it is not going to be, it's like right outside my window here, a beautiful facility. The MEng classes in past years have not gotten this. You will, though, because of the timing of your admission. Okay, now the MEng program is kind of half engineering and half business, so I think this is super relevant too. PitchBook Rankings is considered one of the rankings that the world looks at in terms of the best universities to go to for entrepreneurship. So one way they sort it, or one way you can look at it, is the number of founders, number of companies that came out of these universities, and the capital raised in aggregate. Actually, if you go to undergraduate, Berkeley's number one. But you've been admitted to the graduate program. Turns out Berkeley's number 5 here. And I just listed a couple of companies that were created by Berkeley founders. Maybe you've heard of them. Maybe you've used them. Some of them are quite recent. Some of them are, you know, a bit older. You know, Lime, let me highlight that one. That's a micromobility company related to transportation. That's one of the most successful companies out of Berkeley. And, you know, part of the entire ecosystem at Berkeley is not just the MEng program, not just civil environmental engineering, but there's a huge kind of buffet of programs and support systems if you're interested in entrepreneurship. Everything from the training, which, you know, you will obviously get this base training within the MEng program, but there's more things you can pile on top of it. Like from the Sudarja Dai Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology, they have different added programs you might want to access. And then there's a series of incubators, accelerators, you know, these sorts of things. Skydeck is actually, I think, you know, probably the pinnacle one. And pinnacle, at the very least, in the sense that it sits at the top floor of one of the tallest buildings in Berkeley. So, okay. Yeah. And then being in California, you know, if you haven't been in California before, you don't live in California, being in the Bay Area is fantastic. You have San Francisco, you can go skiing Lake Tahoe, you can go hiking in Yosemite, you know, you can go wine tasting and, you know, spend the weekend in Napa Valley. It's absolutely fantastic. Yeah, so that's my welcome. And I think we're now going to get into the details of the curriculum. So for that, I'm actually going to pass the ball back to Professor Cassidy, and
All
then
right,
I'll loop
Scott.
in with details about systems.
Thank you very much. What I'd like to do is I'd like to spend 5 minutes just kind of giving a in-depth discussion into the curricular requirements and the opportunities with regard to those of you like Boyao who are interested in pursuing the transportation emphasis. So if I share my screen here, I will get this. Can everyone see this set of how about you, Scott? Can you see that?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. So really, as I said, I want to talk about the TE program somewhat in general, but definitely with a focus on the transportation emphasis. And then Scott.
Is it possible to go full? Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm a little slow. But yeah, but then Scott can kind of fill in with the distinctions between transportation and systems. The distinctions aren't that large, I think. I want to give an example of a capstone project because These projects are going to occupy a great deal of your time. They're a big part of the training and preparation you'll receive in the year you spend here. And then we can talk about kind of the timeline, how things happen, starting in late summer and moving into early fall. So let me just talk about what the program is all about. In transportation, it's a 50% mix between learning the fundamentals, the domain knowledge, the science of transportation, mixed with the art and science of business and entrepreneurship. The emphasis, to a large degree, is on what we call intelligent transportation systems. And that makes sense because in the transportation field, we've been plagued by all sorts of problems with regard to performance, too much delay on the system, with regard to environmental problems, pollution, and so forth, with regard to safety, accidents that occur in transportation systems. We've always tried to use technology to assist us with these problems, but as technology becomes more and more mature, communication technologies, control technologies, the ability to move money around electronically and so forth, the opportunities are ripe for really combining the two more than they've been in maybe years past. And so this is what we want to train our students in. Now, with regard to the curriculum, as I said, half the curriculum will be taken from the business school, a top business school in the country. And you'll have a number of courses from that business school. Many of them are what one unit courses that you meet with the faculty member, you exchange ideas, and you take about half a dozen of these. And there's a large menu of courses from which to choose from. I've mentioned just a couple. There's the ethics involved in technology, in managing technology. There's information about, there's a one-unit course, seminar course on organizational behavior for engineers, but there's many others. There's courses on motivation. There's courses on entrepreneurship. There's courses on studying trends in data and so forth. There's, I think now about 13 such one-unit seminar courses from which you can choose, and you choose 6 of those. As I said, there's also an integrative capstone project. I'll give you an example of what that might entail in the context of transportation in just a minute. But in addition to these fine courses that you take in the business school, half of your units approximately will come from transportation engineering courses. Because, as I said, we want to emphasize intelligent transportation systems, and that means the development and the application of technology to solve transport problems. But what often happens in the field of transportation is a lot of people mistakenly think that important principles with regard to transportation science are common sense, and you can kind of figure those out on your own. That turns out to be very much incorrect. In fact, what's most challenging, what's most complex, what's most difficult about transportation is that so much of it involves paradoxes. That means cause and effect relations that are counterintuitive, that you would not expect, that common sense might tell you different. Let me give you an example. If you had a network of many streets and highways and boulevards, and if you were to improve some of the elements in this system, in this highway system, you might think that, well, you can do no harm by improving some of the links, maybe adding lanes to some links, or adding or allowing vehicles to travel at higher speeds, so forth. You might improve the system. That is, by improving some of the elements, some of the links or some of the nodes in the system, you might reduce the time that people collectively spend traveling on the system. That, however, is not true in general. Sometimes you can make what you think are improvements, and as a result, the system as a whole performs in a degraded manner. That is to say, people collectively spend more time, not less time, traveling on the system. The reverse is also true. Sometimes you can degrade certain elements of a large transportation network, like a highway network, and as a result, you get overall improvements in performance. Everybody else overall is doing better. So these are the kinds of things we want to expose our MEng students to make sure that when they're developing and applying technology, they have the skills they need so that when they look at a problem, they can identify what's really causing the problems. And then they can diagnose what kind of solution, including perhaps a technological solution, is best suited to bring about the best results, to serve society, and to make for a more enriching career for our graduates. Okay. So the courses you would take in transportation include two of the core courses that all of our graduate students take, including our PhD students, including our Master of Science students. One of those courses, if you look on the list there at about the middle of the bullet list, is something called CE 251, Transportation Operations. And in a word, let me just say that that course is about understanding the physics of how transportation systems actually operate, including the paradoxes, like the paradox I gave you an example of. And we formulate some methods for kind of studying these systems and learning to appreciate the physics and what's going wrong sometimes with the physical operation of a transport system. The second core course that all of you would take if you join our MEng program in transportation would be, of course, CE 252, which is Transportation Systems Analysis. That is a course that recognizes that transportation is indeed very much an interdisciplinary study. It involves elements from computer science, from economics, from geography, from city planning, statistics, mathematics, and so forth. And in this second core course, Transportation Systems Analysis, a large part is introducing you to the various fundamental tools that are, in many cases, developed from these other fields, like statistics and economics and computer science and operations research, and applying those specifically to solve transportation problems. In addition to those two core courses, you would take two other additional courses for a total of 12 units in transportation engineering. And for those electives, you could choose from a large menu of courses. We'd like you to take at least one course that focuses on one particular mode in transportation. So that might be the highway mode, cars moving on roads. And we have a class for that. It's called CE 255. Or you might be more interested in public transit systems, and we have a course for that that's involved in planning and planning the large-scale transit systems. We also have a course in air transportation, which not only involves the physical operation of airports and the airspace, but also because air transportation is dominated by the private sector, there's also a study of the economic analysis of the air sector. We have courses in behavioral modeling. We have courses in transportation economics. The list is rather long. You would choose two of these courses from the menu to fulfill your requirements for the MEng degree. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, a large part of what you'll be doing as an MEng student would be working on a small team with a faculty advisor and with an advisor from industry on a project where entrepreneurship and perhaps the application of technology is needed to solve a problem. And I wanted to kind of give one example of an ongoing capstone project that took place over several years because it was a rather multifaceted problem. And that had to do with available curb space in cities so that cargo vehicles, large trucks, could load and unload their cargo as part of their delivery system. Now, at first blush, that might seem like a kind of a mundane problem, but in fact, it's a rather sticky one, and it's a rather important one, because as it turns out, the inability for cargo delivery vehicles to park near their delivery points in large cities is a real problem. So what we have are large vehicles, like you see in the lower left-hand column, that circle around city streets looking for parking, which adds to congestion. And very often these vehicles end up double parking or parking in unsafe areas, which certainly adds to the congestion problems of cities. And just to give you an idea of what a problem it is, well, in a single year, a company like UPS can pay more than $20 million in parking fees in Manhattan alone. FedEx pays also very high numbers, as do other freight companies. So this is a real problem. But with the advent of technology, it now becomes possible to identify and reserve curb space in advance so that a truck driver or a freight delivery company could plan the route and reserve curb space in advance so that delivery is made smoother, quicker, and much less costly because we're not paying fines, and society is hopefully paying the fewer externality costs when, for example, trucks double park. So the idea here was to give either to a dispatcher or perhaps to the truck driver information about when and where curb space might be available, and give the company or the driver the opportunity to reserve space to synchronize with the delivery. And there's all kinds of questions involved here. It's what kind of technology would you use to be able to identify precisely where curb space is available? And how would you communicate? Who would you communicate that information to? A dispatcher, a truck driver? How would you communicate that information? How then could parking space be reserved in an efficient manner so there's no waste? And what would you do about violators when a truck driver who doesn't have a reserved space comes and parks? How would you enforce the reservation system? And how would people respond to all these policy and technology ideas? So various studies have gone on around this issue as an example of the kind of things we're doing. Anyway, if you decide to join us, and we very much hope you will, in July, you would get a menu of the capstone projects that are available to you for the coming year. And generally speaking, there are a wide variety of capstone projects, including topics on systems and transportation engineering. And you'd kind of choose the one or ones that interest you most that you would do in August. In September, teams would be formed. So groups of students interested in particular projects would be brought together. They'd meet the faculty member and the industry partner who's kind of heading up the team. And then for most of the fall semester, you work on the first parts of that project. You give a status report mid-year, and then you kind of repeat in the spring semester. So this is kind of what I had in mind I wanted to talk about. Perhaps I've raised some questions you'd like to discuss. I'd be happy to try to answer any of them. Any questions? Any thoughts? Share my screen here. Well, Scott, do you want to take over and talk a little bit about systems?
Sure, I can take over. This is going to be more engaging, guys, whatever question you think you might have. Actually, you have a requirement. You haven't been admitted, but I'm going to give you an assignment already. Ask one question by the end of this session, okay? You do not pass this webinar until you ask one question, and I'm sure others are going to be curious to hear what it is. Okay, so while you're formulating, I'll just say a few words before we pivot back to you. Let me see. I'm just going to share the following slide. So the other program that some of you have applied and been admitted into is called systems engineering. Okay, I'm just going to show this word cloud and talk over it. Now, traditionally in civil environmental engineering departments, you've got these kind of vertical focus areas, right? Structural engineering, environmental engineering, geoengineering, even transportation engineering, right? Systems engineering itself is not very descriptive. I recognize that. So if you applied and were admitted into this, then what I'm going to say next is super crucial so you understand what you're getting into. Is the idea of systems is for it to be horizontal across all of those application-oriented disciplines, where the focus isn't necessarily on an application domain, but rather on methodology. And we've actually debated if we should call this like advanced infrastructure systems or maybe data science for civil. what it really is comprised of is thinking of our built infrastructure as not just being, you know, concrete and steel, the physical elements, but also the cyber elements or the software elements. So you essentially have this cyber physical system, right? It is a combination of both the built infrastructure, but also the software and the data that integrates with it. And I even would push it further than cyber physical and say cyber physical human. You see behavioral, that pops in there. So we're really training our systems engineering students to be methods focused and having the most modern tools to modernize and build future infrastructure systems, right? And traditional industries or agencies that might be responsible for infrastructure, might not be those that are really having impact on infrastructure of the future, you know. So I work a lot with Caltrans, California Department of Transportation. They own and operate the physical infrastructure of roadways in California. Meanwhile, the digital infrastructure, how we understand traffic and crashes along highways, I mean, kind of Google and Apple own that, right? So we're really training our students to sort of cross those boundaries. I'll actually speed ahead to some of our courses since we talked about the transportation courses. Basically, you're required to take 4 courses from this list. You can take 2 in fall, 2 in spring, 1 in one semester, 3 in the other semester, whatever suits you. And then the remaining courses are part of your engineering leadership, which is the same as what Professor Cassidy was mentioning, and is the same for all MEng students. Here's the list of what we're anticipating for fall and spring next year. There's a couple of courses that you actually saw on Professor Cassidy's slide, and I'm actually not going to speak on them in detail unless you want me to and you have a question about it. So I'm going to pause there and get you to ask the question that's burning in your mind.
We'll answer any question you have, including our favorite color. What's our favorite color? Anything you want.
All right, let's try the Socratic method. Fran Arthur, I saw you open your camera for a moment when I was saying interact. I see Marco's question, but Fran Arthur,
There are
did you
two
have a
questions
question?
in the chat. There are 2 questions in the chat. One from Fran and one from Marco.
Oh, okay. Fran's question is it allowed to join in on any class even when you weren't registered officially for that class? I'm happy to take that, and Mike, please fill in, or Jessica. So the word we use for that is called auditing. That's the keyword. And the proper way to do that is just to ask the instructor for permission. Ask, would it be okay if I sat in your class and learned? I think most will say yes. Some will say no. It depends, because even when you sit in, you might consume resources, right? Like a seat, if there's limited like physical seats. Um, also if the professor might be concerned that students who are registered can't ask questions because it's dominated by those who are just sitting in. But I'll tell you that does happen. And my favorite example of that, honestly, is we have a colleague named Paulo Montero, a professor in our department. And as a professor, he sits in on one class a semester, if I understand correctly, even as a professor, in topics he's interested in or topics he wants to learn about. And I think that's amazing.
I could take the second question if you wanted. That
Yeah,
question
sounds
being,
good.
how does the program balance theoretical foundations like optimization and modeling with practical hands-on experience like software tools and simulation? Well, what I'd like to say is we do it very well, but that's just my opinion. What I can say is the objective of doing precisely that sort of balancing is what the MEng program is all about. That's why we have you, for example, take 12 units in your respective emphasis, be it transportation or systems. And there are overlap in the classes there, as Scott pointed out. But then we're going to try to introduce you to some of the finest theories in the science of systems and transportation. But then the application, well, that's really what the capstone design course is all about, which you spend so much time on. You're trying to apply that knowledge in some very practical, real world way. And I think many of the business courses, including the seminar courses, are very much about how do you function? How do you come up with a business model and a value proposition in the real world, given the way the world works? So what really distinguishes the MEng from our other graduate programs is this kind of incessant desire, aspiration to really balance. I mean, this is not to say that our Masters of Science program is purely theoretical, and that's not true. But I think more than anywhere else that we find in the MEng program is that where we're trying to strike that balance.
Yeah, I can add a little color on that is, so I have a general answer and then I have an answer specifically for you, Marku. So, um, yeah, just adding to what Professor Cassidy said, I think if you just took classes and there wasn't the other things in the MEng program, it would feel more theoretical and foundations based because that's what UC Berkeley is famous for. We have a culture of that, right? Being the flagship University of California campus, that's honestly our role in the California educational system to focus on theory and foundations. But the MEng program builds in those engineering leadership courses, and then there's a capstone practicum to bring that balance. So I'd say you're not even getting an approximate version of each side. You're getting kind of an intense version of each side, kind of what the foundations and the courses and the department, and then very practical training. Now, Marco Andrea, you come to us, I think, from Le Grand École, the French engineering school system. So I think you'll feel very comfortable from just our own experience with students coming from that system. You'll feel very comfortable in the classes. And I think the practical aspects from the capstone and engineering leadership, that's I think going to be very much value added.
While we're waiting for maybe another question to come online, let me sort of add to the question that Fran asked about auditing other courses, because I think it brings up a good point. As Scott was saying in his introduction, this is a very fine university with very fine programs in many disciplines, many classes that are very fine and you will find very interesting. You can't enroll in them all because there's so many hours in the day and we all have just so much capacity and bandwidth to absorb material and perform. But you may find there are classes around the campus that you're very interested in and would like to get a sense of what's going on in that particular discipline. We really encourage you to do that. Of course, Scott is correct, and not every faculty member will always let students audit. But I think the vast majority of us will. I've certainly never turned anyone down. As long as there's an empty seat to go around, you're most likely going to be allowed to sit in and learn what you can learn. So don't be shy in approaching instructors and trying to find out if there's a possibility of you sitting in on a class that's of interest to you, but you simply don't have the capacity to enroll in. And, there's other opportunities across the campus too, seminars, special talks, all kinds of things. It's good to kind of stay aware of what's going on in the university community because interesting things are happening most every day.
Yeah, that's so true. You will not get your money's worth if you don't take advantage of all the other stuff that's going on. Joining student groups, attending those seminars that Professor Cassidy is talking about. Like there's for the transportation students and maybe some of the systems, There's a Institute of Transportation Studies seminar series every Friday, which is super excellent. Yeah, there's so much stuff on campus beyond just the structured MEng program. Hey, Maritzi, maybe I actually don't know the answer to Wei Chi's question about for boot camp courses, will the students be on campus or online? Do you know?
Yeah. Hi guys. So the boot camp classes will be both in person and online. We had a kickoff session on Tuesday and a capstone overview yesterday. We will be uploading the recordings in the next few days. So if you guys have any other questions, you can email us, the Fung Institute. I can drop our email on the website. And yeah, make sure to check out the new student admin website too, and I can link it here as well.
And what will students learn from the boot camp? I'm keen to know too, actually. I don't know so much about it.
Yeah, give me
I can hop in and answer that because I went to boot camp in August and in January. So boot camp classes are a little different than technical classes. They're more like leadership classes, but they're different themes. So in August, it's about organizational behavior and R&D development. So basically, we have case studies that we study before classes. So we read articles that are provided to us, and then we talk about them in class and discuss them. And January boot camps, there is a panel with some different themes. I picked diversity, inclusion, and equity. So we talked a lot about that, how we can implement diversity within a university or within a company. And I picked one on accounting and finance as well, because I wanted to have more knowledge about that. But there is also entrepreneurship, innovation, management. And so basically these classes last 2 weeks, and they can be done online or in person on campus. And you're mixed up with other MEng students, so from other departments, so mechanical engineering, bioengineering. So it's a nice thing because you get to meet people from different departments, and you get to learn other stuff than engineering. And it really allows you to, yeah, to learn other things, and it's a good way to start the semester, I would say. I don't know, Marit, see if you want to add on that.
I think you covered most of it, Juliet. Thanks.
Nice job, Juliet. Fran asked another question, another nice one about, do we ever work with students who are outside our concentrations? And the answer on that one would be an emphatic yes. First of all, we should say many of the systems professors and transportation professors are members of both groups. So they work with systems and transportation kind of equally as a normal course of things. But in addition to that, we have all kinds of students from other departments who have interest in transportation. And just over the years I've been here, I've worked with graduate and undergraduate students from programs like mechanical engineering and computer science and operations research and city planning and so forth. It's almost routine. And sometimes we're PhD advisors for students from other departments outside of civil engineering. So, yeah, yes,
Also,
it's
with the capstone project, in the capstone project, you are with students from different departments. So my capstone project is AI for traffic. And so I'm with transportation students, the MEng program, and also EECS students, computer science students. So you will definitely end up working with them. And it's nice because you get to like share knowledge and skills and really all have your part in the project.
And I presume, Juliet, your advisor is outside of civil engineering as well, probably.
Yes, he
like
is.
Computer science.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say also when you look at the number of MEng students in civil environmental engineering, there's not a lot of you, honestly. You know, it's we're trying to increase the group, but it makes no sense to put you in little corners and isolate you and isolate us. Like we're all interconnected and interacting and you're taking overlapping classes. And so yeah, that's part of the emphatic yes. Even if we tried to separate it, it'd be onerous. There was a question further back, Mike, that I think is good for you about also from Fran about for for intelligent transportation engineering courses, what coding language or simulation softwares are we required to know before taking the courses?
Come with a good knowledge of math and physics and the fundamentals, and we'll train you on the other things, the tools you need to use to solve problems. You'll be exposed to how to do that. We're more interested in the fundamentals, I think, than, well, do you happen to know this tool or that tool? Or what's your favorite simulation model?
Yeah, I want to use that as an opportunity to give a talking point. You come to learn, you don't come to already know things. And when we are evaluating applications, and then ultimately when we think about students that go through MEng or any of our degree programs, it's not about the talent they have when they come in. It's about how quickly they grow when they're here. It's the delta, not where you start. Okay. So we have students who come from, families or communities where they have access to all sorts of education. Great. We have students who come from families and communities where they don't have that access. Great. Let's see who grows fastest. Yeah. And who has that right attitude. So yeah, part of that is just with that openness of the fundamentals and that desire of when you arrive, like, how can I learn and engage fastest and grow fastest? That's what matters.
Maritzi, I think you can answer this, but I believe the career fair will be in July. Is that not right?
I believe so, yes. I can drop the link as well.
Obviously, you'll all be informed of that, but plan on later half of July.
Yeah, I want to hit some other questions further back too. So there was how many students 2025 fall MEng? I can tell you I'm just looking at the number here for the 23-24 academic year 2023 to 2024, 478. And then
Yeah. And as far as the department goes, it was something in the low 20s, I believe, right? We had this last year, transportation had a lot of MEng and systems fewer, but this year kind of things have reversed. The pool of applicants and systems is much larger this year than in transportation. So we don't know how many will show up, but I think on the transportation side, we're counting on high teens or maybe 20. And you had a lot of applicants, so you may get close to 20 as well. Systems, that is. So somewhere between 30 and 40 students will come in civil engineering this year. And that's fairly typical, I think.
Yeah, I'll also let you guys know that this MEng program across Berkeley's College of Engineering, it is the biggest master's program. It's basically the master's program for Berkeley College of Engineering. So it's very big. There's a lot of staff support, like Maritzi here, and many others. A lot of focus on supporting that program at the college level. Just so you know, because you apply to civil environmental engineering, our department has a separate MS program, Masters of Science, which is, spans across all the areas of civil engineering. And within our department, it's quite sizable. There's almost 200, I think 173 is the number I'm looking at right here. So.
Yeah, and I think Scott's making a very important point here because there is a real sense of community. Even if perhaps in civil engineering, we only have 30 or so MEng students joining us in the fall, you will mix in with our 40 or 50 MS students, as well as our 4 or 5 new PhD students, and you'll all be part of the same community. The transportation and systems classes you take will be with the MS and PhD students. There's not, I think, Juliet would probably agree with me. There's not a real distinction.
Yeah, I was gonna continue on that. In fact, like we take less technical classes than the MS students, but we end up taking the same technical classes at some point, and we all work together. We are really lucky to have access to the ITS library where we spend basically all our afternoons to work on the assignments, but also there's a ping pong table. There's like always fun stuff to do there, and it's a very, very nice environment. And not a lot of MEng students in the other MEng departments have access to such a nice area. So I think that would be one of the main advantages of civil engineering. And ITS library is great, and we have a great time there. So that makes really the cohort like be very tight together and all work together. So yeah, it's really nice. Even though we're MEng, most of the time we spend is with MS students as well and PhDs.
Yeah, there's a real sense of community, I think, as Julia is saying. Yeah, I don't know what else to add. It's kind of an important part of the formation, I think, and part of the experience.
I'd say number one. Fran, getting the high score for questions. Good on you. There's one, how often or do you ever engage MEng students in research projects, not just for credits, but for research experience? What do you think of that one?
Well, we have something called 299, which are independent study opportunities. It's a little hard to do that in MEng because the things are kind of prescribed. But any MS or MEng student or PhD one who wants to engage in research on a particular topic can get with a faculty member who will advise the student, and you can do a study for credit. In the case of the MEng, I don't think the 299 units will count towards graduation, but it's something very enriching if you're interested in doing and you're able to take on that extra load. Lots of students, lots of MS students, for example, take 299 units. But there's nothing stopping an MEng. It's just you probably can't use that towards graduation.
Mm-hmm. I want to add that I want to be what I think is transparent about my view on this is for MEng students, it's rare, honestly. It's rare. Let's be realistic. The MEng program is something like a master's in engineering, which is often 2 years, okay? When you look across the country and the world, plus an MBA, which is something like maybe 2 to 3 years. And then we say, okay, let's combine it and do it in 1 year. And by 1 year, we mean 30 weeks, right? So it's very intensive. So there's an upside and downside to that. I mean, the downside obviously is it's not as long, but the upside is that it's not as, you don't have that many terms of tuition that you're paying for, and then you get the degree so you can go and compete in the workforce sooner, right? But it tends to be very intensive. So those activities that, time intensive activities that don't contribute towards your degree can be hard. But let me say that I think for a lot of actually just master's students in general, sometimes they're very interested to be exposed to research, if not in the game, responsible for executing things. So something I personally offer to MEng students is come to my lab group meetings where my students present their work, and then you can treat it like a seminar, basically. And you can sit and learn and understand and get exposed to a lot of it without the burden on your shoulders to actually be responsible for executing something. So you can benefit from, learning and talking. And I find that's a nice balance.
Yeah, that's very true. We all meet with our students individually and in groups, and they're not private. They don't have to be private meetings. Anyone can attend if they think there's something interesting being discussed. The doors are open.
I think a nice
Hello,
question.
Professor.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, may I ask a question? Because
I would love nothing more.
because I know MS is only from Department of CEE, but our MEng program is from CEE and the Full Institute. I want to know the difference between Full Institute and Department of CEE.
Sure, I can take a shot and then Mike fill in or Jessica or Mertzi or Juliet. So, within the College of Engineering, we have academic departments, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, computer science, civil environmental engineering, and others, about 4 others. And they have their individual degree programs, right? And you can see those as kind of vertical academic departments across the College of Engineering. The MEng program stretches across the entire College of Engineering. So it's one degree that is administered across the entire College of Engineering. Every student in the MEng program, though, is part of a degree program in an academic department. Yeah, so it's a college-wide effort as opposed to an individual academic department effort. In terms of your actual graduation requirements, the difference is basically you have to do 24 units to get a master's degree in either one. In the MEng, the 12 units of those 24 are specifically allocated 12 or 13. I forget 12 or
25
13.
total for
25 units,
students,
13 in Fung and 12 in the department.
Yeah, so the 13 in the Fung Institute are dedicated towards engineering leadership. So those 13 are what differentiate with the MS. And the engineering leadership are kind of business oriented courses, business leadership, engineering leadership oriented courses.
And the design project kind of crosses both barriers because your faculty advisor will be from an academic department. It might be civil engineering or it might be another department in engineering within the College of Engineering. Fung will administer much of the Fung will do much of the administrative tasks with regards to teaming you up and matching you with the project. But the learning that takes place will that kind of reflect the fundamental and applying the fundamental knowledge as with the assistance of peers, team members from across the College of Engineering, as well as with an instructor from somewhere within the college, maybe within civil engineering or maybe mechanical engineering or operations research. Depends on the project you select. But I mean, the department will be by and large, if we were trying to, for a simple answer, the department will be kind of your place for getting the fundamental knowledge of either transportation or systems. And then Fung will be, as Scott says, you'll be sitting there with students from across the college taking entrepreneurial classes, business classes, innovation classes, and trying to be a leader in the business technical world. Trying to become a leader. You'll have time for questions. Of course, in the coming couple of weeks, if questions emerge that you don't think of at this time, you can get a hold of us by email or however you want to do it. We'll be happy to try to answer. We certainly do hope you decide to choose to join us in the fall. We'd love to have you, and we think it would be, a good experience. I think it's a good choice for most students interested.
I'll put my email in the chat in case you have student-related questions.
If you want the real dope, the real truth, talk to Juliet first.
That's very kind of you, Juliet.
Thank you, Juliet.
Yeah, thank you, Juliet.
Hugely helpful.
Yeah, not to put Juliet on the spot, but I think, you can hear from the program, you can look at the website, you can email profs, but if you have a chance to talk to students, it can be Juliet or other students, right? I think that's really beneficial. You can really understand their lived experience.
And in
being
fact, if
local.
you're kind of on the fence and you're sort of deciding, talking to Juliet's a good start, and Juliet has lots of fellow students who.
That's what I was gonna say. I have friends.
Yeah,
I
you
can
can defer.
redirect you to other people that may be more able to answer your questions, obviously. Like I'm transportation, but I have friends in the MEng systems department. If you need that, I can give you their contact. I'm sure they'll be happy to answer your questions. So don't hesitate. It can really help. And if they're international students, I can help with the visa stuff and all that as well.
We also have student ambassadors and capstone ambassadors, and they're super helpful. I can link their contact information below as well. So give me 1 second.
Oh, before you jump out, guys, copy that.
So Cherry asked a difficult question about deferment. Is that because you're having visa issues, Cherry? Certainly, if there's an administrative government issue and you can't get a visa, we'll try everything we can to defer admissions.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
which
it's kind of a case-by-case question. It's a case-by-case issue.
yes, reach out to me directly and I will work with you.
Jessica, okay, yeah. Yeah, if you're having concerns, Jessica's the person to see. But we very much would like for you to come as soon as you can. It's all possible.
Yeah, that's not an uncommon question or an uncommon situation, right? We think about and deal with that, occasionally. So don't hesitate to ask. All right, I got to jump to my next commitment. It was really great to meet all of you.
Thank you all for joining.
Thank you all. Thank you for your
Hope to
time.
see you all in the fall. Take care.
Good to see you.
Juliet,
Bye.
Cheers.
thank you, especially to you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.